What would prove to be a long and illustrious political career, his leadership role in the Continental Congress would be his most defining and shining moment. He really was, as one of his fellow delegates described him, the Colossus of Independence.
When one thinks of America's founding fathers, the faces that come to mind are the ones carved out in the stone of Mount Rushmore. Washington and Jefferson have reached the level of political gods in our culture and are revered like the idols they have become. These men most certainly helped to shape our country into what it is today, but there were others whose passion for independence from England and actions in the Continental Congress contributed just as much, if not more, to the cause of freedom. John Adams, the rotund and fiery man from Massachusetts, is frequently glossed over in the history books, though his leadership in Congress and his determination to see independence through to whatever end make it obvious that he deserves a legacy on the same level as those who our society touts as the founding fathers.
On March 5, 1770, 5 colonists were killed by British regulars in Boston, in an event that later became known as the Boston Massacre. This blatant provocation by the British caused American aggression to boil over, and the trial became a witch hunt for their guilt. No one in the city was willing to defend the soldiers and give them a proper trial, until Adams stepped in and made the highly controversial decision to try to acquit them. Looking back years later, Adams said, "The part I took in defense of Captain Preston and the soldiers procured me anxiety and obloquy enough. It was, however, one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested actions of my whole life, and one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered my country. Judgment of death against those soldiers would have been as foul a stain upon this country as the executions of the Quakers or witches anciently. As the evidence was, the verdict of the jury was exactly right."
Prosecutors assumed that the jury would instantly sympathize with their cause and did minimal preparation for their case, while Adams pored over interviews and evidence and put together an incredibly convincing body of information that was rewarded with the verdict going in favor of the British soldiers. Though he was criticized for his actions, Adams forever thought it to be the humane and responsible decision. Even though he despised the British control of the colonies just as much as his fellow Bostonians, he firmly believed in the sanctity of justice and equal protection under the law for all men.
The trial and its results elevated his status in Massachusetts, earning him recognition as one of the best lawyers in the state, and catalyzing his appointment to the Massachusetts House of Representatives just 3 months after the verdict was delivered.
Between the Boston Massacre in 1770 and the start of the First Continental Congress in 1774, Adams used his status in Massachusetts to become an impassioned proponent for the cause of independence. He was appointed to Congress, and when he and the other delegates were unable to sway the British Crown to repeal the Intolerable Acts, they resigned themselves to reconvening in the summer of 1775.
During the course of the First Continental Congress, Adams was exposed to many different viewpoints on American independence from the various colonies, and the naysayers caused him to become even more outspoken on the need of effecting a separation from the mother country. Those that disagreed with Adams only motivated him to bring them around to his way of thinking. We shall be driven to the necessity of declaring ourselves independent, and we ought now to be employed in preparing a plan for confederation of the colonies, and treaties to be proposed to foreign power, together with a declaration of independence, Adams said. Foreign powers cannot be expected to acknowledge us till we have acknowledged ourselves, and taken our station among them as a sovereign power, an independent nation.
Adams believed very strongly that independence was the only course of action available to the colonies and tried to express that to the other delegates when the Second Continental Congress began. Human nature itself is evermore an advocate for liberty, Adams wrote in the Boston Gazette under the pseudonym Novenglis just prior to the start of the Congress. There is also in human nature a resentment of injury and indignation against wrong, a love of truth and a veneration for virtue.
Within the congressional pressure cooker, Adams was able to shine and used his passion for the cause to try to sway others to his viewpoint. His vision stretched far beyond independence and spread to equality for all future Americans. But even in Congress, many delegates were still tentative about breaking ties with the mother country. Those in the South had different ideas of the state of relations with England than those in the North, and many in the South were unwilling to sever the bonds. Through his leadership, Adams was able to bridge the divide between the ideals of North and South and synthesize them into a single cohesive nation, capable of declaring independence from the most powerful nation in the world. Adams joined in floor debate day after day, arguing a point, pleading, persuading, and nearly always with effect. No one spoke more often or with greater force.
No one in Congress had worked harder or done more to bring about a break with Britain, but it was the fact of independence more than the words on paper that concerned Adams, and especially for what it would do to unify the colonies and bring spirit to American military operations. The opportunity for creating a new nation was too important for Adams to pass up, and he felt a distinct and powerful responsibility to make it happen. You and I, dear friend, he wrote to Thomas Jefferson, have been sent into life at a time when the greatest lawgivers of antiquity would have wished to have lived. When, before the present epoch, had 3 millions of people full power, and had a fair opportunity to form and establish the wisest and happiest government that human wisdom can contrive.
Adams believed that independence was the key to the future success of the nation and that there was no way to resolve the tension between the colonies and England. I must think myself independent as long as I live, he stated. The feeling is essential to my existence. He took it upon himself to apply that desire for freedom in Congress. Much as he foresaw the hard truth about to be waged, Adams had the clearest idea of anyone in Congress of what independence would actually entail, the great difficulties and risks no less than the opportunities. The combination of patriotism and ambition was seamless in his soul. There was no one else in Congress that was willing to step up and lead the cause for independence and lead the charge towards a formal declaration of separation, and so Adams assumed the position at the head of the operation, fearlessly and passionately speaking day after day in favor of his cause. Beyond just pushing for independence and for the freedom of the colonies, Adams strongly supported the creation of a document that would declare the new country's purposes for separation and the rights this new nation would safeguard. Such a declaration, he insisted, instead of uniting the people of Great Britain against us, will raise such a storm against the measures of administration as will obstruct a war and throw the kingdom into confusion.
In an age where image was everything, Adams was willing to sacrifice his personal image in the best interest of the country. On a daily basis, he willingly confronted issues that no other delegate wished to get involved with because of the complexity and controversial nature of the subject matter. Because he spoke so often and so relentlessly, he encountered contempt from the other delegates who wished for him to stop with his debates. He hates Franklin, he hates John Jay, he hates the French, he hates the English, wrote his sometimes friend Thomas Jefferson in a letter to James Madison. At any rate, honesty may be extracted even from poisonous weeds. He is a man who means well for his country, is always an honest man, often a wise one, but sometimes and in some things absolutely out of his senses, wrote Benjamin Franklin of Adams.
Though he was obnoxious and disliked amongst the delegates, his idea on the eventual Declaration of Independence did manage to stick. In July of 1776, after severe criticism and striking out several of the most oratorical paragraphs, it was adopted on the 4th of July and published to the world. Yesterday, Adams exulted, the greatest question was decided which was ever debated in America, and a greater, perhaps, never was or will be decided among men. His dreams of an independent America had finally come to fruition. He could claim with the lion's share of the evidence on his side that he had been the most vociferous advocate of American independence in the Continental Congress, consistently at the cutting edge of the radical camp, willing to risk unpopularity by dragging the moderate faction in the Congress to a place they did not wish to go.
This unashamed and stubborn style of leadership persisted all through the rest of Adams' political career and personal life as he formed his legacy. As president, he dragged the country forcibly away from war with France and skillfully engineered the XYZ affair to get the country to where he wanted it to be. And as a husband, he frequently put his family second as he pursued what he knew in his heart to be the right thing to do. As a result of his leadership, America went from a whisper of an idea to an actuality.
Despite all of his tireless efforts to get the fledgling nation off the ground, Adams still never received the recognition he deserved. Even during his own lifetime, he was aware of this as he bemoaned, "The essence of the revolution will be that Dr. Franklin's electrical rod smote the earth and outsprung General Washington, that Franklin electrified him with his rod, and thenceforward these two conducted all the policy, negotiations, and war." In the Continental Congress from 1774 to 1776, he had been in the forefront of the drive for independence, but after independence had been achieved, few made as much of that contribution as Adams thought they should have. Part of it was rooted in his appearance, for he was not the lithe and strong genius that Jefferson was, nor did he have the battlefield prowess of Washington or the wit of Franklin. Rather, he was nearly bald and frequently agitated, blunt and assertive, and never afraid to speak his mind. He was not the face that independence would have asked for, but he was the voice it needed in order to happen. While his legacy is marred by miscommunications and very human mistakes, it is always important to remember the little man from Massachusetts who helped America become what it is today. Without John Adams, his leadership, and his incessant push for independence, the nation itself may not exist as it does today, and Adams' legacy should reflect his presence at the forefront of the cause for freedom.